to this edition of Stream On. I'm Jim Williams, your host, and on this edition of the show, we're going to talk about, without question, one of the premier documentary programs on television. It's called Independent Lens. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It is a stellar show on PBS. And when we talk in stellar, we're talking about 25 Emmy Awards, 23 George Foster Peabody Awards, 5 Dupont-Columbia Journalism Awards, 9 Academy Award nominations. This is, as I said before, the gold standard for documentary television on a weekly basis. PBS just keeps knocking it out of the park. And we are joined today by the executive producer of Independent Lens, Lois Vossen. And Lois, I got to say that, I know you've got some exciting things coming for 2021, but let's talk a little bit about how Independent Lens works with your creators to come up with these outstanding documentaries.
Well, first of all, I have to thank you for that wonderful comment. I have to start by saying we work with the most remarkable independent filmmakers, and our strategy is really ground up. The stories come from the filmmakers who find incredible characters and incredible stories and then spend years following those stories. And so what's always set the storytelling apart is the investment, that relationship between the filmmaker and the character, and the fact that the characters entrust their lives and sometimes the most painful parts of their lives to somebody who is initially a complete stranger. And so it really does speak to that process that is unique to independent filmmakers who go in without a camera and meet people, talk to them, get to know them, and build a relationship. And then from that relationship, people say, yes, I want my story to be told, and I trust you to do it, and I'm willing to sort of open my life up to you. And, we've had filmmakers who have, filmed, obviously in people's homes. There's one great story of a filmmaker of ours who was in the closet in the bedroom recording the sound because the couple, would have their heart-to-heart conversations at night at the end of the day. And he wanted to make sure he captured those parts of the story because it was a story of a marriage. And it speaks to that commitment on the part of the filmmakers and really that level of access and trust that is built early on. And that's how they become so rich and so multifaceted.
The other aspect, of course, is the topical aspects of those shows. And, what amazes me is how you can spin up such amazing content in a reasonably short amount of time when you're considering documentary style work. I mean, you're getting right in early parts of 2021 and into the rest of the year. We'll let you talk about it, but you've got some topics coming up here that no one in 2020 could have even thought was going to be on the radar in 2021.
Well, Jim, I think this is actually the thing I'm most interested in talking about, because the truth is all of those documentaries were funded 4 years ago, in some cases 5 years ago. They really speak to the fact that these filmmakers have their ears to the ground. They are out in these communities and they see stories and they see trends and they see issues years before the mainstream media sees it. And it's not a coincidence. It really speaks to the fact that they are out there with their pulse on what's happening inside their communities. A couple of years ago, we had 2 films back to back and 3 films that season on white supremacy. And all of those films were funded in 2012, 2011, and they
Wow.
got finished and came to air right when the last presidency was beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw a rise in white supremacy. And somebody at the time said, "Oh my God, you guys are, prophets." And I was like, "Well, you could look at it that way, but what you could really look at is the fact that these filmmakers are so in tuned to what's happening in their communities." And the same is true of this. We're doing this larger Stories for Justice programming
Mm-hmm.
catalog or block because we saw so many of our filmmakers had dialed into the fact that all of these different issues that are part of our criminal justice system were
Mm-hmm.
becoming more and more of a conversation in their communities, whether it was about bail bonds or about reentry or about the growing rate of women who are incarcerated or
Mm-hmm.
about the growing rate of juveniles who are incarcerated or police brutality,
Right.
Women in Blue about, gender inequality
Mm-hmm.
in policing. All of these came from different filmmakers who don't know each other. They're just
Mm-hmm.
looking at what's happening in their community. And we are in the position, as you said, to look out and say, wow, we have 12 incredible projects in production at various stages that
Mm-hmm.
all look at the criminal justice system. And it happens time and time again. It's been true the entire history of our series. And I think right now why it's seeming so, I guess, obvious is because the zeitgeist has caught up with us in a very big and powerful way. And these films would have come to air no matter what, but the
Mm-hmm.
conversations in the country have actually caught up with the stories that we've been telling for 2 decades.
And yeah, without question. Now, is in your role as executive producer, the do people come to you with pitch meetings, or how does that work? How do these filmmakers come to you, or do you find them, or what's
All of
the
the all of the all of the above.
all of the above? Okay.
Yeah, it works. It actually is different for every film.
Yeah.
A large percentage of our films, as a public organization and public television, we are open to anyone who wants to come to us with ideas.
Right.
Obviously, we try to we don't want to duplicate the work of our wonderful colleagues at Nature and Frontline and
Sure.
American Masters.
Mm-hmm.
So, we try to set out what our guardrails are, but
Mm-hmm.
we have what we call an open call, and
Mm-hmm.
several times a year, filmmakers, pitch us. They send
Mm-hmm.
proposals. We vet those proposals. We have panels and groups come together, and we decide what to fund based on that open call.
Mm-hmm.
So a pretty large percentage of our programming comes through that open call initiative.
Mm-hmm.
We also do have sometimes films that don't make it through that process for whatever reason.
Sure.
They either come to us too early or they're of a different nature. An
Mm-hmm.
example I would give is I Am Not Your Negro. When I met with Raul and he described the project, he was
Mm-hmm.
very early on, and he had not created it yet. It was in his
Right.
head, and he could see it, and I could see it from what he was telling me.
Right.
But I knew that couldn't make it through a panel process because
Right.
nobody else could see it, and he couldn't sit in the room and pitch it to that group of people.
Right.
Similarly with Keith Maitland's film Tower.
Mm-hmm.
I was at South by Southwest and at one of those receptions you go to,
Sure.
and Keith came up to me and pitched me this great idea. I want to talk about gun violence, but in a way that I think will make it interesting to a group of people who would never watch a social issue documentary. I want to use animation.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he described it, I immediately was like, I want to fund that. And so
Mm-hmm.
the result is Tower, which is, of course, as relevant today, sadly, as it was when he pitched it to me in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also that where filmmakers, my colleagues and I, Noland Walker and Carrie and others, we try to be out in the field as much as possible at festivals and other events. And we're constantly taking pitches from filmmakers. And sometimes like in those two instances,
Mm-hmm.
they were great pitches and they were great projects. And so we were able to commission them for Independent Lens.
Mm-hmm.
And then every year we do have a couple of slots where I get to go out and again with my colleague Nolan Walker and something we see at a film festival that may already be done, but we just feel like, wow, that is perfect for us. And so we actually acquire it. But the bulk of programming are programs that we co-fund and co-produce. And like I said, the average is 3 to 4 years that we work with a project before it's completed. And then most of our films, 99.9% of them, premiere at a film festival. Many of them have a theatrical release, and then they come to our series. So it's a long road. We jokingly refer to it as a marriage because the shortest we're going to be working together is 7 years. For many of these projects, we work, 10 years from start to finish, and certainly by the time that their license period ends with us, it's 10 years. It can easily be 10 years or more.
Well, we know it's not a 7-year itch.
Yeah. And every filmmaker, works differently. Some filmmakers need different support. So that's the other great thing. With our open call, we have a group of incredible supervising producers who work with the filmmakers every step of the way, helping them with, small things like, finding crew members if they're going on a shoot somewhere and they need to have a DP for the day. And obviously with editorial questions, with E&O insurance, with clearing rights, with, the music, with everything. And so, it's a team. It definitely takes an incredible village. And I'm really fortunate to work with some of the smartest, most dedicated, really, really thoughtful, bright, wonderful colleagues who also pour their heart and soul into these documentaries because we really believe in the stories that we're telling, and we have a really deep commitment that these issues are central to a healthy democracy. And so understanding them and giving people access to those stories so that people can make their own informed decision, I think all of us really believe in that. And so that's a big part of, I think, also why that consistent support that we give to filmmakers is what you also see when you see the final film.
Lois, I been in the broadcasting business for 40 some odd years now. And I think with the advent of the streaming services and how things have, mushroomed up, that never has there ever been a better time to be a content producer than now. But at the same time, there's so much content out there. It's the ability to be able to identify what goes into what slot, or how can you fit it and where can you put it. And, I think that for you at Independent Lens, that's got to be a bit of a unique thing too, because you have Passport and other streaming aspects that PBS is involved with, that hopefully opens up even potentially some more avenues for you.
Yeah, well, it is true. It's I jokingly refer to it as the wild, wild west. We're all building the plane while we're flying it. When I first entered this field in 1989, there were a couple of outlets for documentaries, and I think you could name them on, 3 fingers.
Right.
And now, Airbnb is funding documentaries, and NBC News has opened up a documentary division, and CBS has opened it. It's incredible, which is wonderful, because obviously, as you said, it's allowed this huge blossoming of the art form and documentaries in general, and it's provided more opportunities for funding, and certainly it's provided more opportunities to diversify who gets to tell their story. We still have a long, long way to go to reach parity and really have sadly, most of the money still goes to white filmmakers. It's still very difficult for filmmakers of color to get, started and to get consistent funding and to get their second project funding. But we're working on that, and that's been a commitment of ours forever. I think the idea that now documentaries can have this availability 24/7 is really what's been exciting, because the nature of documentaries is that they are about issues that come into the news and then leave and then come back into the zeitgeist. And they're often about intractable issues like, climate change and, social justice. And so what streaming has done is made it possible for those documentaries to be available anytime. You used to have to just wait for it to be on television at that one time, and otherwise you'd have to rent it. So I think it's allowed more people to see that documentaries can be a part of their consistent diet, if you will, of what they watch and consume. And that has also, it's like this wonderful vicious cycle. Success begets success, and more audiences bring more audiences. I will say there is, as you said, the challenge that now there is so much content that both those of us in the field have to kind of weigh through to find what is right and what is good and what's powerful and what should be supported and what should be amplified and elevated. And audiences, of course, are inundated now and trying to find what they want. And so it's made this sort of idea of programming or curation even more important, I think, because nobody can track it all. And so they need to go to trusted sources. And that's what we hope we will always be, that PBS, Independent Lens, our colleagues at POV, et cetera, Frontline, that we will always be those trusted sources that people can go to find that part of their, content diet. The one thing I will say that it also comes with a downside, as is always the case. And there is a proliferation of the word documentary that is, I think, a little problematic, where now everybody attaches that word to anything because it's become a sexy word. And, with the programming that we do, we're and PBS, of course, has very high standards about, fairness, accuracy, all of those things, who funds it, editorial control, et cetera. But there are other places that are making programming where they don't live by those same rules, and they're attaching the word documentary. And I think it's difficult and dangerous, because you can have some pretty severe conflicts of interest where, for example, a character in the film gets final cut, and that's no longer a documentary in our world. But the audience doesn't know that. They think we're all playing by all the exact same rules. And so I'm a little bit cautious about how do we educate the public so that they know what they're watching is real documentary versus something that looks like it's nonfiction, but isn't actually held to that same level of rigor. And that, I think, is just something we want to be cautious of, because at a time when people already don't trust the media, what we can't afford is for them to also not trust these programs and, any programming that is actually illuminating the human condition. And so it is a part of, with all positive growth, there's always, there's always, what's the word I'm looking for? Aches and pains,
There's imposters in this particular case. Parading as documentaries. I know I've sat on some film boards before, for festivals, and, you'll get all kinds of things. And honestly, to your point, much, not a lot of it, but some of it is out and out propaganda. And, they slap documentary on it, but you're sitting there going, no, this is not. These are people who are trying to interject their point of view and pass it off as a documentary. And it's actually funded, by a group of people who want to get this narrative out there. Yeah. That's not a documentary.
And within the documentary field, there is an the idea, the question of what's subjective and what's objective has always, it's been argued since the beginning of time.
Sure.
And it's about how you do it. I mean, we've worked with lots of filmmakers who do have a point of view, but we require that they be clear about that, and that they also still be fair and accurate, etc. But I think, to your point, it's about how you present that. Are you fair and accurate? Do you acknowledge what is point of view and what is, not? And I think, again, for me, the question is really about literacy for the audience, and how do we make sure audiences continue to know that what they're watching is what they're watching. I mean, it really is a growing thing. But anyhow, I'm happy to say that our filmmakers continue to really work really hard to be, I like to call them citizen storytellers. They are telling the stories of people who are both ordinary and extraordinary. And when you look at something like Philly DA, the 8-hour docuseries that we have coming up in April, it's sort of a quintessential independent lens project. The filmmakers live in Philadelphia. This guy says he's going to run for district attorney. He doesn't stand a chance in heck of winning, but they think it could be a great story, and so they begin filming him. And they have no idea at that point where the story is going to go, and that it's going to ultimately become an 8-hour docuseries. I mean, they just began filming somebody with no money, kind of in their backyard, in their hometown, in their town. That's what a lot of our filmmakers do. They pick up a story, they begin to film, they begin to follow it, and some of them pan out and some of them don't. And Philly DA, as to what you said earlier, obviously landing exactly in the zeitgeist. I mean, we chose the broadcast dates almost a year ago, and before, obviously, well before the series was done. While we're still polishing and finishing the series, it just so happens that the episode about police brutality is going to premiere on the exact night of the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's death.
Wow.
I mean, it's like, and that episode is about a police killing in Philadelphia of an unarmed Black man. And so, again, the filmmakers had no idea when they were following that story that months in the future, a man would be killed at 38th and Chicago in Minneapolis that would ignite an international movement. But they could see it happening in Philadelphia, and were smart enough to know if it's happening here, it's happening in other cities. So, and Down a Dark Stairwell is another perfect example. It's about an incident that happened years ago, but we have it, and we're talking about it, and it is about this sort of, it looks at both both race and justice. And, it's happening right now after the tragedy in Atlanta, where we have to look at how marginalized Asian Americans have been and have become a target of hate crimes. And so the timing is, I'll just say again, it really is that the zeitgeist has caught up with the filmmakers.
Okay, we've come to the part of the podcast that I like to call shameless plugs. Whatever you want to talk about that's coming up that you really want people to focus in on. You've actually given us a little bit of a preview of that without going into shameless plugs, because you're a very class person. I appreciate that. So now is the shameless plug aspect of it. My words, not yours. So Lois, it's yours.
Okay, well, I would joke and say, how long do I have? But I'll try to be succinct. Yes. We have a film that just premiered this week that's still streaming called Coded Bias that I think is essential for anybody to watch. Anybody who has a cell phone should watch this documentary. That's how essential I think it is. And it really looks at, artificial intelligence and other ways in which algorithms really run our life. And now when you just Google, do I want a flight to New York, and suddenly you get inundated with ads about hotels and restaurants in New York, that's the tip of the iceberg. How our personal our personal choices are being mined and sold and repackaged back to us. And that in of itself is scary. But then when you add in all of the bias that is inherent in all of us, because we all have implicit bias, it's just a really, really important story that is not getting enough exposure. And especially with a generation upon generation now coming up who have never known a world without cell phones, where all of their personal information isn't being mined and sold. I just think it's essential viewing, and it's also very interesting, and a couple of very great characters who take us through that story. We have a film coming up that I absolutely love called The Donut King, and the director, Alice Gu, it's the first time we've been able to work with her, and it's about donuts, which what's not to love? It's about donuts, but it's obviously also about so much more. It's about immigration, and at a time when our country is really wrestling with the issue of immigration, it looks at the reality of who immigrants are. Who are the people coming to this country to create a new life? And how do we look at immigrants and as a country as a whole, and historically, and especially right now when there's so much turmoil in the world and people still look to the United States as this beacon. But what I also love about the film is that it's very accessible, and it's told in a way that is that keeps the viewer very engaged, partly because we're talking about donut shops, but also because the main characters are really human, very, fallible, but also very rich in terms of storytelling. So The Donut King, I think, is a great film. And as I said, the issues that you'll encounter, the story of family, the story of struggling small businesses, the story of a diaspora, the story of addiction, it's all in this one incredible story wraps around a big glazed donut.
Well, you had me a donut, so I'm good.
Yeah. We have a wonderful film coming called The People versus Agent Orange, which, again, incredibly timely. Legislation is being looked at right now about how we are going to compensate people who were harmed by Agent Orange. And a lot of people, I think, well, that happened in the Vietnam War. That's in the past, not realizing that some of these companies are literally dumping these chemicals on humans and animals today, right now, yesterday, tomorrow, next week, that this is not an issue of the past. This is an issue that has an ugly past, but is very much current and happening now. And then, of course, Billy D.A. I think we're just extremely excited about this docuseries. We've done docuseries in the past. We've been very fortunate to have that work recognized, by the Television Academy in the past. And then we didn't do some for a few years. And so it's great to be back in the docuseries world. And this particular docuseries, great filmmakers who are just really smart about how they're making the film, and great collaborators. And as you would guess, being it's 8 hours, we talk about so many different issues that are pertinent to the criminal justice system. What I think is the most interesting for viewers is that I think most of us, myself included, had no idea what a district attorney actually does, how powerful they are, the fact that we could vote them in and out, what that vote means, and really how much that one role dictates the entire, way that criminal justice is approached. And of course, they're one person in a large system. So to blame them or credit them is, too simplistic. But, there is this very interesting progressive DA movement happening across the country. And the DA in Philadelphia is just one of many. The movement was begun by, as many great movements are, Black women in different cities across the country who said, people who look like me are disproportionately a part of the criminal justice system. And so people who look like me need to have a larger voice in what is happening inside the criminal justice system. And that's what this documentary really is about. Who makes the decisions and where is it disproportionate? And how do we as a society want to use our resources? Do we want to use them to incarcerate more and more people, whether they have an addiction, or do we want to use our resources in a different way? And so it just asks a lot of questions, and it doesn't demonize anybody, which is what I really love about the storytelling. And my other real sort of shameless plug is that I think it's made in a way where it is as exciting, as invigorating as any television drama. It is pictorial drama at its best. There are cliffhangers, and there are surprises, and there are fascinating characters, and there are people you're going to love and people you're going to not love, and there are people and each viewer will come away with a different experience, but it's great television.
Well, if you got Dick Wolf doing 27 variations of
Law and Order,
I'm pretty sure that this one will fit right in there.
Well, there's even a great line. One of our characters says, if you believe Law and Order got it right, then I need to teach you something, or something to that effect.
Yeah, there you go.
He directly talks about, how he wants to challenge some of the things that we are led to believe about Law and Order, or through Law and Order. But it's really great television, and it's great storytelling. But again, so relevant to right now. And again, what's happening in Philadelphia is happening in Miami and Baltimore and Chicago and San Francisco and Los Angeles and it's and small towns.
Sure.
So those, several of those films like Down a Dark Stairwell and Philly DA are part of this larger initiative that we're doing around Stories for Justice, where we're really wanting to bring to our audiences lots of different stories from many different perspectives about the criminal justice system, because all you have to do is look at it and you can see that it's actually at a tipping point. It's no longer a partisan issue. There is great interest on both sides of the aisle to talk about criminal justice, probably not complete agreement about what to do, but there is agreement that something needs to happen. And so we hope that these documentaries can help inform our audiences so that they can be prepared to, take action. And by take action, that can mean voting, that can mean, participating in something in their community. It's a different thing for everybody, but it is about sort of giving people the information they need to be informed about what's happening in their community and across the country.
Right. And community involvement is so very important. So now we know what's going on. Where can we find it? We can obviously find it on our local PBS affiliates, but from a streaming standpoint, it's on Passport. And how about on the website? Where can we find your information on the Independent Lens? Its own website as well. So go ahead.
We do. So at PBS, just go to pbs.org/independent lens. And we have, 30 different things streaming at a time. It's some of these feature documentaries, which stream for a period of time, and then some of them go dark, and then they come back. And then we also, though, have other things there that people will be interested in, short-form content that we produce on a wide range of topics, and journalism shorts that we're working on, and as well as we've brought back a lot of films from what we call our catalog. Last year, PBS has put together a wonderful initiative called Race in America, and we've brought back a lot of films that are about all of these different issues, well as militarizing police departments, peace officers, what's their job. So all of those are available. And in addition to that, we have short form content that streams at PBS Voices. So people can also check out that great digital channel on PBS. So lots of great opportunities. But Passport is a great place to go because that's where we have a large volume of our programming. but we understand that we've all become consumers of streaming, and so we know it's important that people be able to watch our programming both on television, but also when they want to watch it, when they have the time.
Well, prime time has become whatever time you wish it to be.
Yeah, prime time could be Saturday at 8 a.m. if that's your
Right,
prime
exactly.
time.
If that's your time.
Yeah.
And we will link all of that in the show box below, so people will not have any problem finding it. We'll make sure that they will have the roadmap to get all this content right in the show box below. And a shameless plug for me, and that is that one of the great deals out there is PBS Passport, because you're supporting your local PBS station, and for what the amount of money you give versus the amount of content you get, it is a amazing value. So
I agree with you, Jim. I mean, I really have to say, and I'm trying to not be biased about this, but I completely agree with you. The price is very affordable, and the volume of content that's there, that wealth of programming that's not just Independent Lens, obviously, but across the board from all the other great series, it's mind-boggling. I mean, it's such a rich array of content, whether you're interested in documentary or arts programming or whatever it is that you're looking for that particular night. So I'm a huge fan of Passport and having access to that wealth of content. PBS also has a great new documentary channel, PBS Prime, for people who are real lovers of documentary. And there you can go and get, again, these incredible documentaries that have been on PBS, whether they're Stanley Nelson's entire, portfolio of remarkable work, or our past programming, POV, all these series that are doing documentary work. So that's also another great outlet for people who are really interested in this particular genre specific.
Well, in my case, we have, I subscribe to two passports, one for Maryland Public Television, one for our friends across the river in WETA. So got to keep them both. Keep them both going, and they do. One of the great things about Passport is that they do offer not only the outstanding programming that PBS produces themselves, but also the local programming, which is so important to support as well.
I think that is a great point, and you're right about that. When I turn on my station or when I go to Passport, I will find things that I completely missed because we can't keep up with it all. But I was just not trying to replug Philly DA, but I was just watching, and they had an interview with our DA here in San Francisco. And I was like, wow, I totally missed that. I was so grateful that I had a second chance to watch it because of that opportunity with streaming. And so it allowed me to actually gain more information about an issue here in my backyard that I had, missed the first time around. And I think people also, I don't know, I think sometimes I get in conversations with people where they think they have to go to just the big streaming giants, but there's just so much programming that PBS oversees. I'm always really thrilled when, like, my nieces and nephews tell me they're watching PBS programming. They're always streaming, and of course they don't watch any linear television, but I think they're always amazed because they don't really, it's not the first place they think to go, but when they go there, they find this programming that is so, what they're talking about.
There's such a deep and varied amount of programming that runs the gambit from, news type programming all the way to, Are You Being Served, which is an old British, BBC sitcom that I think the last episode was shot in 1978 or 79. But it's still quite popular and still, in the portfolio of many of these PBS stations. So, without question, there's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, we have this wonderful documentary, Mr. Soul, that is about a program that was on PBS in the 70s called
Mm-hmm.
Soul. And it was the first national television program that celebrated African American culture. And it's all live performance. And so it's the first time, a 17-year-old Arsenio Hall was on television, and Earth, Wind, and Fire, and Al Green, and Patti LaBelle, and, the list goes on and on. It's literally a who's who of great Black artists, but also writers and dancers and poets, etc. And that was one of those documentaries where a friend of mine, called me and said, "Oh my God, this was so entertaining," because it literally is like going to a live concert. It's so invigorating. And she called because she said, "I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting, a social issue doc." And of course, that's part of it, but it really is much more of a performance show in certain ways. And so I think people are always delighted when they encounter that kind of programming as well. And we're certainly thrilled when we can present it, because it is also part of the larger stories we're trying to tell.
Well, I've worked many times with Arsenio, and he's a true character. A lot of fun to work, a lot of fun to direct, a lot of fun to work with.
Well, if you love Al Green or
and Earth,
they're
Wind,
all
and Fire, they're all there.
Stevie Wonder. I mean, it's everybody. James Baldwin, and great poets like Nikki Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez, and it's pretty remarkable. And it's just really, you can't. When I was talking with the filmmaker, I'm like, you cannot watch this and not smile or want to get up and dance or something, because it's just such a wonderful celebration.
Well, it spans generations too.
Yeah, it really is. And that's
style.
Exactly. And for me, again, it sort of speaks to these filmmakers being on the cutting edge, because, there was a big film that came out of Sundance this year that looks at the Black Woodstock. And this was this program is what seeded things like that to happen in the real world. So, again, our filmmaker was, ahead of the time in terms of saying, hey, it's time to celebrate this incredible program that PBS pioneered back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. I'm still an Austin City Limits fan. So
yeah,
it's amazing. Well, Lois, thank you so much for joining us, and promise to come back and talk to us again sometime whenever, we got some stuff to promote. We're always here to listen for our friends from PBS.
Well, thank you. It's been great talking to you, and we just really appreciate that you're making this information available to your listeners, and we hope that they will find great programming either on air or on the website or at Passport, to help them live a better life.
Special thanks to our guest, Lois Vossen, the executive producer of Independent Lens on PBS. All the information on how you can find their outstanding documentaries will be in the show box below. We'll be back with more of Stream On right after this from BMW, the ultimate driving machine.
At BMW, we know leaving the road wasn't easy, but anticipating our return taught us to appreciate every drive. The exhilaration of the ultimate adventure. Moments spent with your favorite co-pilots. And the freedom to explore just because. Our time to rejoin the road is finally here.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. Now, if you're not one of the over 60,000 people worldwide who've joined our party, well, first of all, shame on you. Second of all, we make it simple. It's free. You can find us at the Apple Podcast Store. You can find us at Google Play, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, as well as Amazon Music, Pandora, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, just to name a few. Now, if you have an assistant device, all you have to do is say, hey, Google or whomever, please play the latest edition of Stream On with Jim Williams, and guess what? They'll do it for you. If you still can't find us, not a problem. Pull out the old Google machine, type in Stream On with Jim Williams, hit the favorite button or the subscribe button, and each week you'll get a brand new edition of the podcast sent directly to your tablet, to your phone or hopefully to both, okay? So we would greatly appreciate it if you go out there and do that today, all right? Join the party. We're going to have a lot more fun as 2021 continues to move forward. Lots of fun stuff coming up, so please go out there, subscribe today. So what are we going to watch over the weekend? Well, the return of one of the most loved stories, family stories, I should say, of the 1980s is back. The Quack Attack. That's right, folks. A program so powerful, a movie so game-changing, that it changed an entire group of kids of the 1980s into actual hockey fans. And that, of course, means the Mighty Ducks. The Mighty Ducks Game Changers. The iconic team is now the enemy, with Lauren Graham leading her son's team of underdogs after he's cut from the original crew. And before you ask, yes, Amelia Estevez is back with the Quack Attack. And he's as good as ever as the hockey-hating Gordon Bombay. So this week, Disney Plus, The Mighty Ducks Game Changers. I've seen the film. It's clever. It's funny. As reboots go, we talked a little bit about Coming to America with the reboot of Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall, which was a fun film. This is very much a fun family film. If you like the Mighty Ducks, you'll like this one. It's got the same kind of vibe to it. So Disney Plus, Mighty Ducks Game Changers this weekend, well worth looking into. I know there's a lot of people out there whose brackets have been busted. That's right, on the sports side. I think mine was busted about 5 minutes into the tournament. March Madness in the Sweet 16 is coming up this weekend. And it's on CBS and TBS for the men's side. Over on the women's side, it's ESPN. So, you know what that means. To get CBS, if you're not someone who gets it on, via streaming any other way, there's two ways to do it that I would suggest. I would strongly suggest you try out Paramount Plus. It really is a fine service. It offers tremendous amount of content of all interests and all different genres. So give that a shot. You'll get you'll get your local CBS outlet, which of course will give you all of the CBS games for March Madness. If that doesn't appeal to you, then I strongly suggest you take a look at lowcast.org. That's lowcast.org. In most markets in the country, you can get your local TV stations, that's all of them, for $5 a month. Now, you can get a free version of this that has pop-up ads. The pop-up ads seem to come at very inopportune times, so I would strongly recommend you spend the $5. It's worth the time and effort. So either way, you got the options to get there. You've got Paramount Plus, which is a 7-day subscription. I highly recommend. Lowcast, pay the $5, and you'll probably not be disappointed with that either. So either way you go, you can get CBS on either of those options. As for the TBS portion and the ESPN portion, well, I strongly suggest you try out a 7-day trial of Sling. It will give you both, and they do a wonderful job. Plus, they also have the option where you can share with friends so that 2 or 3 of you can watch it together, and that's their wonderful watch party option. So by all means, give them a try out, and they have TBS, so you can watch the men on TBS, and you can watch the women's tournament all weekend long on ESPN. So a couple of options there. And if you're someone who doesn't mind watching things on the computer, well, you can check out NCAA.com. That's NCAA.com. They also have options where you can watch both the men's and the women's tournament. Okay, so that should take care of you. If you're in the mood for music, well, The Queen of Rock and Roll is a documentary, and I've seen it. It's really phenomenal. It's very good. It takes a look at the life of the iconic singer Tina Turner. It's done in a way, quite frankly, and I've seen a lot of information and docs about Tina Turner, in the past, and there's a lot of stuff here I've never seen. So, strongly recommend you check out the Queen of Rock and Roll with, as I said, plenty of behind-the-scenes interviews that you've never seen before, some audio tapes that have never been played anywhere else before. That's going to be premiering simultaneously on HBO and HBO Max on Saturday night, March 27th. That's this coming Saturday night, 8 p.m. on both HBO and HBO Max. Let's take a minute, too, to add to the group of information I just gave you about some shows that we can binge over the weekend, that we add independent lens to that. Lois Vossen, who was our guest, and we greatly appreciate her being with us at PBS. Check out their stuff in the show box below because there's plenty of content there as well. So, to add with the stuff at Disney Plus, to add them with the March Madness, to add with the HBO Max, by all means, check out all the information about Independent Lens in the show box below because it's certainly worth looking at, and there's plenty of great content. So, don't want to leave them out either. And once again, many thanks to Lois for joining us today. All right? Okay, cool. Now, you guys continue to amaze me because you're constantly hitting me up on both Twitter and Instagram and, of course, via email on things and shows that you're turning me on to and networks that you share, streaming networks that you're turning me on to. Many of them, as you know, turn out to be shows that we do on the podcast. So always great to hear your feedback. Always want to hear your feedback. So keep it coming, okay, guys? There's plenty of things going on worldwide. I don't care where you are in the world. We got some great stuff from Australia that's coming up. We've got some wonderful stuff both from Canada, the UK, some stuff from Sweden, all kinds of stuff. So by all means, keep us in mind and let us know what you're watching and things that we should be covering, all right? So by all means, keep hitting us up on Twitter, on Instagram, and on our email. All of that's in the show box below. Well, look, it's been a long week. I hope it's been a good week for you all. Have a safe and wonderful weekend. Happy Passover. And to those of you of the Jewish faith, myself included, who will be enjoying our Passover Seder, smaller and more Zoomy this year. But by all means, it's most important that we be safe. So everyone, have a wonderful and safe weekend. We'll catch you next week right here on Stream On. For the entire team at Stream On, I'm Jim Williams saying thanks for joining us. We will see you next week. Be safe and by all means, stay healthy.